Welcome to 100 Yards of Football this morning. I'm your host, Vincent Turner. Our video today is a history video. It's about the National Football League. It's about a special team. The 17 champions, the Washington Redskins. I was 22 years old at the time, 1982, and this team came out of nowhere. So if you like the video today, please come in and share it. And joining me from Key West, Florida, he's a gentleman. I don't have to say no more about him. He's royalty here at 100 Yards of Football. He's a scout. He scouted under Bill Belichick and Bill Parcells, scouting all these great NFL drafts. He's the guy that's blowing up right now. When I say blowing up, he's blowing up across the nation. He writes for Draft Diamonds. He writes for SI, the New York Jets and the Detroit Lions. But most of all, he's a very, very special human being and a friend to my heart because he's came onto our platform that's really done a lot for us. And he has an outstanding book, Whatever It Takes. And people, you've been watching our videos for a long time. And we appreciate all the support that everybody's giving us to 100 Yards of Football. It's the Christmas season. But I will beg you, if you're going to buy a Christmas gift, please buy this young man's book. Because when I say this, the book is unbelievable. You're talking about overcome obstacles. You're talking about getting close to God. I'm very blessed to have this man on my show today. Talking football. And we're going to talk about his favorite team, the Washington Redskins, Super Bowl 17 champions. How you doing, Mr. Kelly? Coming to us live from Key West, Florida.
Hey, I'm doing really well, Mr. Turner. How are you today, sir?
Hey, I'm doing very well, sir.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you for the opportunity to be on your platform. It's always fun. Always fun being with you. Always fun being on the show.
Okay, let's start. Let's talk about the Washington Redskins, Super Bowl 17 champions. Before I get started and you break down why this team was so special, what you love about it, I want to do this to you, Daniel. Hail to the Redskins!
Hail victory! Braves on the warpath! Fight for Tell us about the Roger, pass the score. We want a lot more. I know all the words.
Okay. Tell us what's so special about the Washington Redskins and this team, especially Super Bowl 17 champions.
Well, everything's special about this team. I mean, just to kind of give our audience an idea, this is the team that launched me into my lifelong pursuit of the NFL. This is the team that captured my mind, my heart, my imagination at 8 years old. Just to kind of give you an idea, I was watching an RCA television with my little pajamas on with feet in them with a little number 44 T-shirt over the top. Now, this is way before they had NFL kids jerseys on NFL.com. There was no internet back then. But basically, I had a little T-shirt. My grandma bought me a red T-shirt with screen printed yellow 44 in the front and back, and it said Riggins on the back, just like you see on your screen there, number 44, my favorite football player of all time, the player that my hero, really. And it was a team that just absolutely captured my imagination, my heart, and my mind. As I said, this is a team that really did come out of nowhere with a second year coach named Joe Gibbs. And a little bit of backdrop about this team so you understand why it was so special and how it came about. If you're going to talk about the 1982 Redskins, this conversation begins and ends with Bobby Beathard, who was a general manager who I feel is the best general manager in NFL history. He's in the professional Pro Football Hall of Fame right now. He's a guy that brought this team together, and he walked into Jack Kent Cooke, the owner of the Redskins at the time. He walked into Mr. Cook's office, a couple years prior, and recommended a young coach named Joe Gibbs. And as Joe Gibbs tells the story on NFL Films, Mr. Cooke looked at Bobby Beathard and said, "Joe, who?"
Hmm.
Joe who? That was one of my favorites of all time. Nobody had any idea. This is way before Joe Gibbs was a Hall of Famer that he is, and 2 professional Hall of Fames in the NFL and NASCAR. This is way back when nobody knew who he was. But Bobby Beathard was the architect of this team. Bobby Beathard was the man who put this team together, and it was a collection really of younger players, of lower round draft picks, of Mavericks, misfits, cast-offs, and they were quarterbacked by number 7 Joe Theismann. Every team in the NFL now, they're like, we got to get into the top 5. We got to do whatever it takes. We'll trade we'll trade our next of kin to move up in the draft to get into the top 5. Listen, the 1982 Redskins had a man by the name of Joe Theismann at quarterback that Beathard brought in, who had played in the Canadian Football League, and of course he goes back to Notre Dame, and his name was really Thiesman, but he changed it to Theismann to rhyme with the Heisman, so he could try to win the Heisman, if you remember. And he was somebody that came in, and then of course then they had the running back number 44, again my favorite player of all time, John Riggins, and Riggins was the heart and soul of this team. But they had a lot of character to the team. They had the Hogs up front. That's when the offensive line, that's really when offensive lines became famous or got a lot more recognition. Offensive linemen, they became the Hogs, and this was a collection of guys that protected Joe Theismann when he passed, and kind of cleared the roadway for John Riggins when he ran. And then they had different collections of players. They had a group of receivers named the Fun Bunch, who always went into the end zone, and every time they scored, they jumped up and gave each other a high five. One of those players being Charlie Brown, who I'm personal friends with to this day, number 87. They had great tight ends. Doc Walker was the starter that year. They had Donnie Warren, number 85. They had an incredible man by the name of Joe Jacoby at left tackle. And I don't have any paper in front of me, by the way. This is all from memory. Number 66. They call him Highway 66. Jacoby had come in as a defensive tackle, undrafted from Louisville, and they moved him to offensive tackle during the training camp, and he was incredible at left tackle. And then they had guys like Russ Grimm and they had George Stark, the veteran, at right tackle, and they had just a tremendous collection of players. Mark Mosley was a kicker, and then on defense, the thing on offense before I move to the defense is the players. It was a strike shortened season. They only played 9 games that year, I believe, in 82, and really they played as a group. They were very cohesive. There was a lot of chemistry on this team, and this is something I talk about as an evaluator from time to time, is the importance of chemistry. And Bobby Beathard, the general manager, understood chemistry, and that's what this team had. They fit together perfectly, and they played as a team, and they won as a team. And then on the defensive side of the ball, they had a young defensive end named Dexter Manley, who stole the show on the defensive line. They had a good group of linebackers. They had Neil Okowitz in the middle. They had Rich Malott from memory. They had a defensive backs named, I believe their nickname was the Pearl Harbor Group. They were guys that just were always back there. Vernon Dean was back there. I remember him, and Tony Peters and those guys were back there. It was a tremendous group of players that all play as a team. And in the strike shortened season, they just came on. They came out of nowhere. And when they got to the playoffs, they just kind of took over. They beat Detroit. I think they beat each team in the playoffs by an average, I think by 19 points or something like that. They beat Detroit, and then they went on to the first game I had ever seen as a Redskins fan was against the Minnesota Vikings. I grew up in Minnesota. My parents were huge Vikings fans, so they had the game on the corner of their living room on that RCA television I mentioned. And when I first saw the team, it was like love at first sight. sight. I didn't. The team picked me. I didn't hardly even pick the team. I mean, it was just something where people say, well, why the Redskins grew up in Minnesota? It was just magical. It was just the colors, the team, the Coach Gibbs, and then really what I want to touch on too is RFK Stadium. RFK Stadium was a magical place to watch and see a football game. It was the fans were there. They made it so loud. I still hear players that played on that team say they can close their eyes and they can still hear the chant before the NFC Championship game. We want Dallas. We want Dallas. We want Dallas. And it was like this. The NFL films capture perfectly as the Cowboys, led by Tom Landry and Danny White, and those guys were walking out onto the field through the tunnel, and the chant became so deafening and so daunting, and the fans. If you watch a game at FedEx Field, it is nothing. I'll say it again, nothing like RFK Stadium. When they played at RFK Stadium, that was true home field advantage that Washington had, and watching that game in the NFC Championship game when the Redskins beat Dallas, it was, and that's when the game when Darryl Grant, when Dexter Manley batted the ball up in the air, Darryl Grant intercepted and ran it back for a touchdown. That place just erupted, and they went just nuts. And here goes the Redskins. To the Super Bowl. I'll never forget in that playoff run, by the way, when John Riggins took a bow in front of the crowd after beating the Vikings the week before the Dallas game. But I remember sitting there with my dad, and we were watching the game. And after the NFC Championship game, and I remember like Ronald Reagan, the president, President Reagan, calling the Redskins and congratulating them. Joe Gibbs is on the phone, and I was captivated. I was absolutely captivated. That really just catapulted my passion, my dream for football, for the NFL, for being a general manager, everything that I want to be. That team is a foundation. And so when they went to the Super Bowl against Miami a couple weeks later, in Super Bowl 17, I remember sitting there watching the game again, my little pajamas with the feet in them, blue pajamas with my little Reagan's t-shirt my grandma got me over the top. And the game came down, and this really has forged my philosophy in life. This game forged my philosophy in life. The game came down to the fourth quarter. It was 4th and 1. And it was the Dolphins were ahead. It was like 10 minutes left in the game, fourth quarter. And Joe Gibbs and the Redskins were going up against Don Shula and the Miami Dolphins. And Don Shula was like a David versus Goliath matchup. I mean, here's Joe Gibbs, an unknown second-year coach, going up against the legendary Don Shula. It would be like a first-year or second-year head coach going up against Bill Belichick right now, just to put in context. And so he's saying on the sidelines, it's 4th and 1, 17-13. Redskins are trailing. 4th and 1. Most every team in the NFL would have punted and lived to see another day, played a field position game. And Joe Gibbs turns to his offensive line coach, the coach of the Hogs, who the offensive line loved, is Joe Bugle. And he says, Bugs, Joe Gibbs says, he goes, he tells a story in NFL films. He says, what do you think? And Bugs looks at Gibbs and says, I like our chances with John Riggins against any safety in the NFL. And they called the play 70 chip was the play call. I'll never forget it. And 70 chip was the play call. As a matter of fact, years later, my first year with the Jets, John Riggins was covering the Jets as a member of the media, and he didn't sign autographs for anybody. But I walked up to him and I said, he kind of looked at my credentials. I asked him to autograph a football for me and my brother, Monroe. And I asked him to autograph these balls, and he kind of looked at me skeptically. I said, John, 70 chip, Super Bowl 17. He goes, give me the footballs. He signed them. He said, so that was the play call. I remember the name of the play call, even 4th and 1, Super Bowl 17, 70 chip. And it's a legendary play because it forged my philosophy in life to go for it. I'm a guy, when I become a GM, I'm going to have a punter on my roster. I'm going for it on every 4th down. Joe Gibbs wrote a book called 4th and 1 even. A great book. I highly recommend it. And really his book 4th and 1 inspired me to how I wrote my book, Whatever It Takes. So this game, this play, this whole thing really forged my life's philosophy, and how I'm going to run a team. And so Joe Theismann, yellow 41, and he takes the snap and he hands it off to John Riggins. John Riggins goes off the left side. And as you see in your screen, that's Don McNeil, the Dolphins defensive back, literally like trying to tackle John Riggins. Good luck to him. He drags kind of off of Riggins for 2-3 yards until he goes to the ground, and John Riggins is off to the races. Now, I talk about this in my book. The look I saw on John Riggins' face on that 4th and 1 play was something that was legendary. You could literally etch that face into Mount Rushmore. It was a look of raw and pure determination I have never seen since in 40 years of watching NFL football. He was off to the races down the left sideline into the end zone. The 2017, the Redskins never looked back. They went on to win the game 27-17, world champions. Washington, D.C. went crazy. The parade after when they won the Super Bowl, everything was just, and that was the beginning of the Redskins dynasty of the 1980s and the early 1990s. But yeah, that team was extremely special. And what's unique about the Redskins and unique about Joe Gibbs is Joe Gibbs, in my mind, is the greatest coach in NFL history. And I've worked with Tony Dungy. I've worked with Parcells and Belichick. And so when I say that, and the reason I say that is because Joe Gibbs is the only coach in NFL history to win 3 different Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks. And Gibbs, that 82 team, each team was different. The 82, the 87, and the 91 teams were all distinctly different. But that 82 team was extremely special because it was the beginning of the Redskins dynasty. And it was really something that Bobby Beathard, the general manager, everybody gives Joe Gibbs all the credit, and Gibbs deserves a lot of credit. But Bobby Beathard was the orchestrator of that team and all those teams, and he's the one that put it together. It was magical. If someone were to ask me about the 1982 Redskins like we're talking about right now, I can define it in one word: magical.
It's great that you're a Washington Redskins fan. You grew up loving them. You know I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan. Been a Cowboys fan since 1966. So back then I was 22 years old. So of course I was tuned in every Cowboy game back then. And of course I remember that NFC Championship game. But what really stuck out to me about this 1982 Washington Redskins team, they didn't win no preseason games.
That's right.
They lost every preseason game. And then most of all, they had lost to the Cowboys in December in the regular season 2014. But like you said, the fun bunch. I'm going to start with them, the wide receiving corps. Very special group. Virgil Say, Troy State, Moultrie, Georgia. Art Monk, White Plains, New York, Syracuse University. Charlie Brown, a good friend of yours. St. John Island, South Carolina State. People don't really realize how explosive he was, and he was a big-time player in playoff games. Then, of course, Alvin Garrett, the eyes of Texas, Angelo State University. And then Rick Walker, LA's finest, UCLA. Then another California, Dan Ruin, San Diego State. But other things that stuck out to me, especially in the championship game. I believe that championship game was played on a Saturday. Watching the game real tight. But somebody came blowing off the side there. And this guy, if he wouldn't had no problems, he was one of the best pound-for-pound football players that I ever seen. Saw him play up close and personal. I'm going to get to that real quick. But Dexter Mantley was special. Lawrence Taylor, special.
Absolutely.
And he came off the end, batted that ball, and then Darryl Grant took it in the end zone from 10 yards out. And what I reminisce is Tony Dorsett tried to make that tackle on him, and Darryl Grant just bowled him off like a wrestler. A lot of things about Darryl Grant. He came to the Redskins as an offensive tackle, and then moving to D tackle. And he was an academic All-American, came out of Rice University. And I saw him play up close and personal because I attended the University of Arkansas from 78 to 82. And Rice was in the Southwest Conference. But Dexter Manley, the first knowledge of Dexter Manley, sophomore in college. Dexter Manley playing at Oklahoma State. They had John Coker, Harold Bailey, two outstanding college players. Arkansas beat them 27-7. But on that night, September 23rd, 1979, Dexter Manley was making every play all over the field. But what really stuck out to me, Daniel, he was covering punts like he was with the Redskins.
As a gunner, yeah.
And you know who was the coach for Oklahoma State at the time? Jimmy Johnson. But when you look overall, the whole Redskins team, I look at that roster from Dexter Manley. But Vernon Dean, like you say, San Diego State player. Tony Peters, Boomer Sooner, University of Oklahoma. Marty Coleman from Central Arkansas. I know all about that area. 30 miles where you went to school from Little Rock. Then you got Mark Murphy, who's been an outstanding GM from Colgate. Smartness. Then you got Jarius White, who plays solid football out of the University of Hawaii. Then you got Curtis Jordan from Lubbock, Texas Tech finest. Then Perry Brooks out of Southern University. And then, of course, a guy who I thought was one of the meanest football players that kept that Washington Redskin line really tight and mean. Dave Butts out of Purdue. Man, he was a big man. But all in all, like you said, the characters that ran that football team, the guy that made it work was John Riggins. And like you said, looking at the picture here up on the screen, that 43-yard run and how he ran over Dan McNeil. And I tell you where I was at. My father was throwing the Super Bowl party with friends over to our house, 1248 Single Trees down in the 901 Memphis, Tennessee. We had about 25 people in the house watching the game. And I'm going to be honest, I'm going to give you a little tidbit. I was cheering for the Dolphins. And because
of course you were.
And I didn't like Washington. But when Riggins broke that run, it was electric in the Rose Bowl, Pasadena, California. And so much credit to the Washington Redskins, a team that took lower draft picks and turned them into a Super Bowl champion. Like I say, Joe Gibbs, kudos to you. Bobby Beathard, hey man, you got to get an A plus.
Absolutely.
Final words about this team, Mr. Daniel Kelly.
Well, I tell you what, by this day, I got this tattoo on my hand of the Redskins logo, so you can see what this team did for me and what this team meant to me. This team was everything to me growing up. I ate, breathed, and slept Redskins football as a result of this team. And you're right. I mean, it was just it was a special team. It was a special team because of the collection of players that they put together, the fans, RFK. It was just magical. It just catapulted my passion and my dream for NFL football. And it's something I'll never forget, the 1982 Washington Redskins.
My final words about the Washington Redskins. Very special football team. And another guy I'm throwing out, Otis Woonsley, Alcorn State. Saw him play in college, played in college with a good friend of mine. So I grew up with Lawrence King. And I saw Otis Woonsley play with the Alcorn State team that had Leslie Frazier, Mark Harper, Ronell Young. Very special football team back when I saw him play in person in 1979, the Alcorn State Braves. But my final words about the Super Bowl champion, 17, the Washington Redskins. I think about this young musician at the time. He was making a real stay across the nation. His name was John Mellencamp. He had a song that went like this. When I was a young boy, I said, put away those young boy ways. But now I'm getting older, so much older. It hurts so good. In the 1982 Washington Redskins, they made everybody in the country hurt so good. But you got to give credit to Bobby Beathard and Joe Gibbs. So if you like the video today, please come in and share it. I'm your host, Vincent Turner. And joining me as always, the guy who I consider the best covering the NFL draft, my man coming out of Key West, Florida, Daniel Kelly. Please, if you like the video, please come in and share. We'll surely appreciate it here on 100 Yards Football. And to our producer who makes everything happen behind the scenes, Mr. Logan, Landers. Don't forget that name. He's up and coming as a producer on social media. I'm blessed. Merry Christmas. The Washington Redskins, Super Bowl 17. Daniel Kelly, he was good with the Redskin hat in the jersey. Thank you. And be blessed during these holidays.
Be blessed. Merry Christmas.